Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend today's workshop. My name is Daria Orlowska, and I am the data librarian at Waldo Library and your facilitator for the conversation today around cleaning your tabular data. So after attending this workshop, you should be able to figure out if OpenRefine will work well for your data needs. I hope this session can give you a good sense of what the software can do and if those functionalities are appropriate for the data that you are working with. And uh, identify common data cleaning strategies. So even if you decide not to use OpenRefine, I will be going through some data cleaning steps that you can use with any program as you prepare your data for analysis. And three, how to actually employ these data cleaning strategies within OpenRefine. And I will demonstrate how you can use these steps within the software so that you can later replicate them on your own data set. In the interest of keeping this workshop to an hour, I have structured it as a live software demonstration with the assumption that you can apply these data cleaning steps to data on your own time. I have put together a guide for you to reference after the workshop, and I will be sharing that at the very end along with the attendance link and the feedback form. So hopefully that will be enough steps so that you can actually replicate what we talk about today. If you are looking for some hands-on help with your own data set, please contact me afterwards and I'm happy to walk you through anything we covered in this workshop. Or feel free to ask me any questions that you have during the workshop. I will try my best to pause and ask if you have any questions, but this is a little bit different if you've attended any of my workshops this week from what I've done in the past, since I will be actually sharing my screen and showing you the steps. So feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself and ask directly if you're comfortable with that. So now without further ado, let's get started. So first, what is OpenRefine? OpenRefine is a free open source tool that uses Java to run on your machine. The application uses your web browser as an interface, but doesn't connect to the internet and only stores your files locally. And we'll see that as we go through the demonstration. When you upload a data set, it creates a copy of it as a project. So it does not modify your original file. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I've saved over my raw data. Any cleaning steps that you take are automatically saved as you go. That's every 5 minutes while you're using OpenRefine, it will automatically save it. And it will save when you shut down the program. And it also documents those steps within the program. This allows you to easily see all the steps that you have taken and allows you to copy them over and apply them to other programs with similar structures. So if you have one file that is structured a specific way and you've done your data cleaning on it, you can take all those steps and copy it over to another file that uses a similar structure or needs similar cleaning steps. The program's interface provides an easy way to find and resolve inconsistencies, such as typos or numbers falling outside of a range. Personally, I have found that OpenRefine works best for me when working with small to mid-sized data sets. I typically say less than 50,000 rows. I know that it can be more, but that really depends on your computer's processing power. It wasn't built to deal with really big data sets, like over 1 GB is probably something that is not suitable for this software. But if you have a lot of RAM, or you might be able to sneak 100,000 or even more rows. So here we are on my other screen. And essentially, when you're going and setting up OpenRefine for the first time, there is a download. It's free. OpenRefine is an open source software for dealing with data. And so you will go ahead and pick which type of device you're using. If you're using Windows, if you're not sure if you have Java, I would recommend the one with the embedded Java. Otherwise, you might use Mac or Linux, depending on your operating software. So what happens when you download this is this downloads as a zipped file. So you're going to have to go ahead and unzip it. And when you unzip it, you'll end up with a folder that looks like this. And the way that you launch OpenRefine, let me move this back onto this window, is that you actually just click OpenRefine here. I would caution you not to drag this outside onto your browser because it's not going to launch. So just keep it within the folder and keep your folder somewhere that's easy to access, whether that's in the documents or within the desktop. I would caution you not to drag this outside onto your browser because it's not going to launch. So just keep it within the folder and keep your folder somewhere that's easy to access, whether that's in the documents or within the desktop. You switched from web to folder, yes. Yes, so once you've downloaded it, you unzip the file and you will open up the folder. So I'm gonna launch OpenRefine now. Is it showing up? It should be blank and it should be loading. You can see it? Okay, great. You will see that when OpenRefine first launches, it launches this black window with text. Just keep this open while you're working with OpenRefine because closing it will have it stop. So this is just working on the back end. You don't have to do anything with it. OpenRefine will launch in your web browser like this, but like I mentioned before, it doesn't actually connect to the internet. It just uses your browser. So it first opens up onto this one screen here, and we can see a few options. We have create project, open project, import project, and language settings. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do when you get started is you're gonna wanna create a new project. On my computer, I'm gonna go ahead and choose a file and go ahead and select uh, the file that I want to work with. But before I do that, I just wanted to go over these options. So opening a project is when you've actually worked on a file before and you've closed the software. It will just give you a list of all the projects you have and you can click into it and it will take you straight to the project. Importing a project is when someone shares an OpenRefine project with you. That will include the spreadsheet file and all the cleaning steps that they have taken. So in order for you to see it within OpenRefine, you first have to import the project before you can open it from your screen. But you don't have to worry about that right now. So for now, for today, we're starting a new project. So we're creating this project from our computer. We're choosing a file. In this case, I'm choosing a CSV file and I'm clicking open and then clicking the next button. And what you see here is actually just a preview. It's a preview of the file. And the reason that you get a preview is that you get a few different options to make sure that you have everything set up correctly. So right here at the bottom, let's do it here at the top. The first thing is a project name. So it will use the same name that you had with your file. And we could just rename it to whatever we want. We can do sample open refine project, for example. Maybe I should actually spell it correctly. Open refine. Okay. You can create tags if you want to, but you don't have to. Then at the bottom here, you have a few different options. You can parse the data through with different files. So depending on what you're uploading, you're going to want to choose something different. I'm uploading a CSV file, and that's what I'm selecting. And then you have some character encoding. So UTF-8 enables like the special characters. So you can always put that option here. And then you have how the columns are separated. I have a CSV file, so they're separated by commas. So this is what I choose. But you can always change the options. You can see what it does. So if I had selected tabs, you see that my preview changes how it's displayed and it's no longer displaying correctly in columns. So you might want to play around with these options if you're finding that your project looks a little bit weird. I'm going to keep with CSV. I'm going to also keep this option where it says parse the columns as headers. And that just tells me that I have my first row has some information. I'm going to use characters if there are any column separators, because sometimes you can use tabs but because I'm using CSV, maybe this is an option that I want encompassed in quotes so it doesn't mess with how I'm parsing my columns. I'm also going to I'm going to uncheck this store blank rows because sometimes you have data sets and they have a bunch of blank rows at the bottom, and I just don't want them in this data set. You can include them if you'd like. And all of these options look great for me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and create a project by clicking the top right link. Okay, and so now we're in the OpenRefine interface. So this is what it looks like when you actually have a project loaded in. So just a quick overview. We have our title here, and you can always change it. You have a window here. We'll deal with this in a little bit as we're cleaning the data. We have how many rows are included in your data set. And you will notice that only 10 are showing up right here. You can change the amount of rows that are showing up for each record. But OpenRefine is really strong in data cleaning and making very like sweeping like views of the data set to give you a good idea of what you're working with. And so it is possible that it's not the software for looking at every single entry. So I would recommend that you probably work with less rather than more. You can also toggle between pages or go to the next and last. So the first thing that I want to bring your attention to with the cleaning steps is your column names and do they make sense? So you might be using data that you have compiled together, or you might be using data that you got from a different source, like you've downloaded from a database. This was downloaded from a database, so it's not data that I have compiled personally. And if you have found data from somewhere else, you always want to make sure, even if you've created your own data, do these columns make sense? And if they like if you will be looking at them later, will you know what they mean? So if they do not make sense, or if they use special characters and you want to change them, you can do that really easily within OpenRefine. You just use the drop-down menu next to the name, and you go to edit column, and then you click rename this column. And we could just rename it to whatever we want at this point. So the other thing is that I mentioned is special characters. The reason you might not want special characters within your headers is that if you're using a different program, it might not recognize that header name. So just be sure that you're using things like underscores instead of spaces, and that you're not using things like the dollar symbol, those special characters that might be hard to parse for software. Okay, so the second data cleaning step is looking kind of at your columns and seeing if the data types make sense for each column. So for example, you would expect a number for month, day, and year. And if you suddenly have text in there, perhaps things were transposed wrong or things were shifted over, and that's something you want to look into. It's just kind of a sanity check to make sure you're actually dealing with the data that you are dealing with. You will see if when OpenRefine imports things, unless you have chosen a different option, it will default all your values to text. This is sometimes a really good way to start off with, because if you have dates in one column, sometimes it might not read them incorrectly. So reading everything in as a text is a good first step, and you can always transform them. And we will talk about that in actually just right now. So for example, we have year here, and we know that's a number, and we want to transform it into a number. So we can do edit, using the drop-down menu, we can go to edit cells, common transformations, and we choose to number. And at this point, you will see that you have a transformation that was conducted. It will tell you how many cells were transformed, and it will turn everything green. That's how you know that it worked. And now it's using that as a number. And when I mentioned that OpenRefine is really good at giving you an overview of your data set, the way we can do that is we can use it to tell us what is the range of the data within our data set, and see if there are, for example, any outliers or things that don't make sense. So the way we can do that is we can use facets. So if we use the drop-down menu under year and go to facet and then click numeric facet, you get a range of values. And what's interesting here is that it says 1880 to 2010, but really you have this one date that's way over here and all the other dates are clumped together, which tells us that this is potentially an outlier. And since most of our dates are 1970 to 2010. And if we actually go and do another facet, we can do a text facet. This will list out all the values within that column for us. And from this, we can see that we have 1888, and which is definitely an outlier for a data set. So it is possible to make changes at this point, but just keep that in the back of your mind that might be something to inquire about. So the software is really good at providing you kind of an overview of what you're looking at here. We can also use faceting as an overview of not just numbers like we see here arranged, but also text. So for example, within the scientific name, we can go down and press facet and go into text facet, and this will also give us our entries consolidated into all the like unique values. I'm going to go ahead and close the year just so that we can see this more easily. And just a reminder that if you are on a desktop, within WebEx, there's a little zoom functionality on the left side of your screen, and you can zoom in if you'd like to see something more clearly. So here, what do we see? We see some interesting things where this looks like the same entry that as the second one, but there might be some spacing before or after, which doesn't allow the program to consolidate it because the computer sees it and thinks that they're two separate entries. So we can easily standardize things like extra spaces by going into transformation again. So using the drop-down menu, we can go into scientific name, can go into edit cell, common transformation, and we can trim leading and trailing white spaces. Those are just the spaces that might accrue at the very beginning of your text and at the end of the text. And to us, they're kind of invisible. OpenRefine makes it easy when you're consolidating to kind of give us a sense if there are maybe spaces at the front of your text, but it's not going to give you a good indicator whether there might be an extra space at the end. So trimming these is a good way to standardize your entries. So we can go ahead and trim that. You can see that there's been 3 cells that have been transformed, and now we have 28 choices instead of 29. I'm going to stop here. Does anyone have any questions? We're good so far? Okay. So the other thing that I would recommend that you do for standardizing is I would go ahead and not just transform the leading and trailing white space, but you might also want to transform everything to lowercase. Uppercase and lowercase entries are sometimes considered unique entries, especially if the capitalization is inconsistent. So by doing this, this is a very easy way to standardize things as well. Other transformations that you might want to consider is collapsing consecutive white spaces. That just means that you have like 2 spaces in a row between your text, or maybe 2 tabs, and the software will get rid of that for you and will just put 1. The other thing you might consider, depending on what data you're working with, is unescaped HTML entities. So that's just when Unicode characters are expressed through characters. So sometimes, especially if you're reusing data or you're copying and pasting things into different software, you might get weird representations of characters. So you might get and NBSP semicolon to represent a space if you're copying and pasting from like the web or something. And This is just because they're unescaped HTML entities. So by clicking that, you can easily mass change all of those into something that's more legible. The other thing that you might want to consider is replacing smart quotes. A lot of the times the newer software has things like curly quotes that designate the opening and the closing of quotation or like paragraphs. Um, and if you're dealing something with plain text, it might show up weirdly or it might not register. So by replacing it, it will just replace it with straight quotes instead of curly quotes. So those are some common transformations that you can do to standardize things. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can look at our scientific name facet window again. And as we see, we have 27 choices. Um, and you can see that some of them look very close to each other. And those are potentially just misspellings or things that weren't standardized when data entry was conducted. Like someone just had different spellings that they were employing or switching things around. And if you hover over each of these entries, you can actually see an edit function. So you can go ahead and technically edit these entries in the window. But OpenRefine has a really good way of doing this using clustering. And the way that you want to access clustering is going into the same column that you're dealing with. You use the drop-down menu. You go to Edit Cells, and then you go into Cluster and Edit. And this will pull up a window that will have some sort of have your options, and using functionalities, some like text functions, it will look at each of the entries and see if they're very similar to another entry and prompt you to merge them together or to create one entry. And this is a very powerful tool, especially if you're dealing with a lot of text data. Because it can bring up things that you might not spot if you're just glancing through the column. There are a few different methods and key functions that you can select, and I would suggest that you play around with these because each one will give you different options. But essentially, it will tell you what values are within a cluster, what they look like. You can decide whether or not you want to merge them, and then you can choose the suggested name that they give you. Usually it's the name that has the most options, or you can type in your own if you want to merge them all into one entry. So in this case, these all look to me as if they were the same thing. There's one that starts with E, but it looks very similar to the other ones. So it might just be a misspelling. And if I know for sure that it is a misspelling, I might merge it. Same with the bottom options. So I can go ahead and click this and I can either merge selected and recluster. This is good if you want to explore other keying or method functions. You want to merge things together before you switch windows or you're going to lose it. Or you can just say, this is all I want to do and I want to merge the selected and close. And that's what we're going to do. We're not going to explore anymore. And it will tell you that you've mass edited 739 cells and it will update your facets. So how many unique choices you have in your data set. I would argue that this is OpenRefine's most powerful feature. And if you have text data, that this is definitely something that is very useful, especially if you're dealing with data that you didn't enter yourself or that you've downloaded from somewhere else. Any questions for me at this point? I'll give you a second. Okay. Sometimes the other thing that OpenRefine is really good at is splitting columns. Sometimes you have multiple pieces of information in one cell that you want to separate out into multiple cells. And so, for example, in scientific name, you have the genus and the species, and say you want to split those out into two different cells. We can go into uh, edit column and then split into several columns. And this will bring up a new menu that tells you asks you rather how you would like to separate the entries. So in this case, we are using a space. But if you would like to have more control over what you're splitting on, or if you have specific criteria that you might be splitting on, it's good. You can even use regular expression if that is a language that you're familiar with. That gives you kind of control over exactly what part of the text or what characteristics you want to split on. The thing to keep in mind is that it will remove what you are splitting on. So if you are using a piece, like if you have two words and the second word starts with AB and you're splitting on AB, you want to make sure that you realize that the AB is going to be removed from the next column. So just to keep that in mind, but in this case, it's very straightforward. We just have spaces, so that's what we're going to split on. We're going to let OpenRefine guess the cell type. It's probably going to default to text in this case, but you can always not have it guess the cell type if you don't want to do that. And we'll have it not remove this column. You can, if you, for example, you know that you only want two columns, if you don't want the original column, you can have it remove it, but we'll just keep it. So it is working, and now you see we have three columns. We have scientific name 1, which is the first part of scientific name, and scientific name 2, which is the second part. And we can make this easier to understand for ourselves by renaming it. So we can go to edit column and rename this column and rename it to scientific genus and rename this to scientific species. And that's how you go ahead and split a column up. At this point, we've done a bunch of different things. We haven't done that much, but we've taken some steps, some data cleaning steps. We've looked at column headers, we've potentially renamed things, we have changed how we've aggregated some entries to make them more standardized for things like spelling. We've looked at ranges and potentially made some changes there. You can access all the changes you have made by going to this, by toggling the left menu and going into undo, redo. And this will tell you all the steps you have taken. And so, for example, if you decide that you didn't actually want to split this column up into two columns, you can go back and get rid of it. And it's very easy to undo things. And you can decide that you want to redo it, and then you just click it again, and it will revert your changes. This is what I was talking about when I said that OpenRefine tracks what you do. So it's very good for letting other people or your future self know what actions you've performed on a file. You can also extract these steps and apply it to a different project. So say you have another project that is formatted exactly like this and you've taken a bunch of steps, you can go ahead and choose which steps you want to apply and then copy the script, which is in JSON, and then access this undo redo menu and apply all those steps. You will notice that there are some things that maybe you don't want to change over, like we mass edited the scientific name, and perhaps that's not going to apply to another project, so we could uncheck it before we copy and paste that. It also is worth noting that if you made edits on single cells, like for example, we saw that 1888 was an outlier within a year. If we had gone in and changed that 1888 to 1988, it wouldn't actually appear within our operation history. Single edits to cells are not recorded because they're considered as unstandardized, like it's not something you can apply across multiple data sets. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on for using OpenRefine as a beginner is filtering. Filtering is a way that you can reduce the sample that you're working with within your data set. And it's also very easy to do. So we can go into scientific name again, and we can choose text filter. and it will bring up a new window on the left menu right underneath scientific name, and say that we're interested in all the scientific names that have, let's say, this sentiment, like we're interested in everything that starts with these 4 letters, and it will bring up all the entries there and we can work with them. Same thing if we decided to do like heresy. This is really good because it targets similar entries and you can select a specific group. It's also really good if you're dealing with a larger data set that OpenRefine might have a hard time parsing. So if you're doing mass editing like through clustering or through filtering, sometimes it could go ahead and hiccup or shut down if you have too many rows. But by filtering it to make sure you're dealing with a smaller sample size, you're avoiding some of these issues and you could potentially bypass, even if you're dealing with a large data set. So I can, if I just delete it, it will go back to the full data set, and you will notice the rows will change at the top to tell you how many records you're dealing with. The other way that we can filter within this data set is that we can actually go specifically within the facet window and we can choose to include or exclude certain entries. So say I'm interested in this entry, so I want to include that, and I want to include this, and I want to include this. And it will update and it will tell you how many rows you're dealing with. And you can easily exclude these entries as well. Once you have entries that you're including, if you're going to be doing things like clustering, you're only going to be dealing with those entries. So I can even go ahead and cluster on a different column, for example, locality. We can go to edit cells, cluster, and edit, and you will find that you're only dealing with the cells that you have filtered on. And just to revert that, we can just exclude, and now we're dealing with our full rows. One other cleaning step that's very useful is sorting. I'm sure that if you've used Excel or any other software management software management software, you can go ahead and choose how you would like to have the data displayed. So in this case, say that we want to go ahead and sort on scientific name. We can click sort using the drop-down menu, and it will bring up some options about if we want to sort it A to Z, if we want to sort on case sensitive, if we're dealing with text or numbers or dates or booleans, which are true and false values. The other great thing about OpenRefine is that you can choose how we would like the sorting to appear. So if there are any errors or blanks, you can move them up to the top or to the bottom, and order them however you want so that you can easily find them. So say I want to sort by A to Z for scientific name, I can press OK. And if I go back into that field using that drop-down menu, now you will see under sort, it tells you sort or reverse sort or remove sort. So it will already indicate to you that you've sorted this column. And you can continue to sort by other columns as well. So say I want to sort by scientific name, and I also want to sort by maybe year. So I'm going to go ahead and sort that by number, and I want to do largest first. Okay, so I've sorted these things together, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we have a new option that has appeared on the top menu. We have a sort option, and this will actually tell you all the columns that you're sorting by. And so it's an easy way to see if you've like selected multiple columns and you don't want to have that sort option anymore, or if you want to reverse the sort. Or you can actually reorder the rows permanently. So say that you want your data file to always look a certain way. This is how you do it. Okay, and in this case, let's go ahead and remove all the sort. So we do that by using the drop-down menu and just clicking remove. And we're back to where we started from. So this is all within working within the project. Now say that you have done all your data cleaning steps, which there are a lot more of, and I can kind of highlight a few other things that are within OpenRefine. But say you're done cleaning your data and you want to export your output. There are a few ways to go ahead and do that. So on the top right menu, you have an export function. And you can export things as an OpenRefine project. So this is good because it will create a project that you can share with colleagues. Projects also encompass things like your steps that you took for data cleaning. So by saving it as a project, you will get access to the spreadsheet and also to all the steps that you have taken, and you can easily email that to individuals. This will create a tar.gz file. So it is only, you can only open it with OpenRefine, so that's a consideration that you have to keep in the back of your mind. So the person you're sending it to also needs access to OpenRefine to use it. The other thing that you can do is you can save it as a tab separated value or comma separated value. These are really good options if you are trying to use an open format. What I mean by that is that these formats are non-proprietary, so they don't require a specific type of software to use. So you have like Excel, and you can only open, for the most part, Excel files with the Excel software. And you have to deal with things like versions of Excel might change, and that might change how your data is being displayed. By saving it as something like comma separated or tab separated, you're keeping things very open. You're opening the amount of software that other people can use when accessing your data. You can also export your data as other things. So you can export it as Excel if you think you're going to be working in that software. You can export it into a Google Sheet. So there are other options that you can take. Just keep in mind that these are maybe more proprietary and it limits future reusability. So if you are putting this data set, like submitting it into a repository afterwards for long-term storage, or you're putting it into a place because you want to reuse it in the future and you might not have access to that software, keep in mind that you might want to save a copy as something that's more open. And those are the steps that I have prepared for you. I'm going to take a second and see if you have any questions about OpenRefine or anything that I've covered today, things, or you can even compare your data set to external data sets for like Wikidata. For example, if you're dealing with historical figures and you want to just cross-check your data with things that are online, you can also do that. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this lesson. So when I was talking about splitting columns, what is the first step? So the first step is using the drop-down menu and going into Edit Column, and then going into splitting into several columns. So the two things that we're really dealing with is Edit Cells, and that's specific entries. And then Edit Column is if you want to make larger changes to the column. Within larger changes to the column, you also have options to move the columns. So you can move this column to the very beginning of your data set, or move it to the very end, or shift it left and right. Okay. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this workshop kind of gave you some basics on how you might approach a spreadsheet for cleaning and how OpenRefine works with spreadsheets and how you can use it. If you're looking for more ways to actually practice your data cleaning, this was a condensed version of a data carpentry workshop. And there is a link that you can go to, and it will have some exercises and solutions. So if that's something that you want to practice on this data set that I was working with, that's something you can do. I am going to go ahead and share. If I pull up the chat here, I'm going to go ahead and share the link to the Google Drive, which has a guide to all the steps that we took today. So it has screenshots and some text to help guide you if you want to replicate with this on your own data set, as well as this ending slide that has some links. If you're if you're also inclined to provide me with some feedback on if you liked this session or anything you would recommend for future sessions or any other data related sessions I can offer, feel free to use that survey link as well as the attendance link to mark that you've actually attended. If you missed anything else from the workshops that I offered earlier this week, tips and tricks for finding data or managing your data in spreadsheets, those are both up on YouTube right now. I also have links to the slides, so feel free to shoot me an email if that's something that you are looking for. This workshop was, like I said, only there to offer you a general overview of things that you can do with OpenRefine. If you have any specific needs or would like help working with your personal data set, I am happy to set up a consultation with you and walk you through that. Also happy to talk about any data needs that you might have, including any new projects that you're setting up, storage options on campus, how to document your data, or how to prepare your data for sharing. I'm also happy to stick around and take any questions. So if you have them, feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat.